Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. Jeffrey Burke here. I'm your host, and I thank you once again for taking the time to tune in. My platform is here to bring you the most up-to-date, groundbreaking information from some of the most amazing and the best minds in the natural products industry, as well as some interesting voices from outside the industry. You know, in my mind, everybody has something great to share. I feel the information, the tips, and the beneficial ideas that we get can come from everywhere. Today, you're going to love this. I am sitting on the edge of my chair because I'm very excited. One of my very, very favorite people in the industry that I'm actually kind of really having my first long-term conversation with, although we've met over the years. Mark Blumenthal is here today, and we are definitely going to be talking about some things that I think you're all going to enjoy. So let me welcome my guest, and remember, all of his wonderful information is in the bio that's attached to this. So you're going to read it and see all the absolutely incredible things he has done. And I think you're going to find him to be quite interesting. Sit back, enjoy. Hey, Mark, how are you today?
Supernatural. Thanks for having me on, Jeffrey.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And like I said, I have been following your career for such a long time. And I just think that what you have done and what you have brought to the industry, and I just think it's been absolutely incredible. And I thank you for all you've done.
Well, thank you for caring enough and for including me in your podcast. I'm grateful.
Well, you know, the reason I wanted to have you on today, well, many reasons. One, just to spend time with you. But number two, also, our industry has changed so much. I mean, I'm going in my 47th year in the industry, and I've seen a lot of metamorphoses happen right in front of my eyes. So many changes, some good, some great, some bad. But where do you see, if we're going to talk about where we were, where we are, and where we're going, you know, I'm sure you're seeing the changes as well. And where do you think we are at this stage of the game right now as an industry?
Okay, so let me just say I'm in the herbs portion of the industry.
Yes, you are.
I'm involved with herbs, medicinal plants, beneficial, functional mushrooms, functional foods from a vegetable source, etc. I'm a vegetarian personally, have been for 57 years this year. So I got into this whole area of interest because I was a vegetarian going to health food stores in 1968 when I was graduating from college and trying to learn about how to eat healthily through vegetables and plant-based materials as much as possible. I still eat a little bit of cheese and a little bit of eggs here and there, but about 90-95% vegan. And that got me, you know, going back to the health food stores back in the day, they'd have a whole wall of herbal teas from Select and Alveda, etc. This is before celestial seasonings even came on the market. And they'd have books that were basically books about folklore. And Jethro Kloss's Back to Eden, the Herb Book by John Lust, the Herbalist by Joseph Meyer, who was my first herb book, basically. These are the first three herb books that I read back in the late 60s. And I became interested in this field as a hobby and lived up in a commune near Taos in the early 70s, off the grid, and just got into the natural world and the Whole Earth Catalog and that whole thing about how natural is better. And I still believe that natural, whenever possible, is better. And I'm a big believer in the power of herbs and medicinal plants because I not only made it a hobby, but I made it a profession. I started an herb wholesaling company called Sweetheart Herbs back in 1974. Then started various herbal organizations and publications, eventually creating HerbalGram, our now peer-reviewed journal, color journal, which started out as a newsletter back in 1983. So it's been 42 years for publishing just HerbalGram, and then starting the American Botanical Council in 1988, 37 years ago, to be a non-profit vehicle to take HerbalGram, the newsletter, and turn it into a scientific American style publication that's accurate, peer-reviewed, referenced, well laid out, beautiful, colorful, compelling. And that's people call us the Scientific American or the National Geographic of herbs. And we now have members in 80 countries around the world. We're an independent nonprofit research and education organization. HerbalGram.org is our website. And it's a very, as you know, a very information-rich, loaded website that is basically non-commercial, although we do acknowledge our grateful support from various members of the herb industry. But we are not an industry organization per se. We're not a trade association. We're an independent, nonprofit, science-based research and education organization that's supported by pharmacists and physicians and researchers and botanists, natural product chemists, consumers, street people, botanical gardens, research libraries, etc., in 80 countries around the world. So we're like an independent, international, science-based herbal think tank, if you will, with 6 different publications. If people go to herbalgram.org and just register, they get all kinds of free information from us. You don't even have to join, but we'd love to have you join. The point is that back in the day, when you ask about where are we, and where are we going, back in the day when I got into the herbal community, and I see myself as an ABC as part of the herbal community, the industry being a subset of the community, because the industry is the growing, the collecting, the harvesting, the processing, the research, the marketing, and selling of herbal material, herbal products, herbal ingredients, including, and when I say herbal, I'm going to include fungal and medicinal mushrooms as well as the subset, just to kind of, but obviously mushrooms are a totally different family in the biology. And back in those days, herbal medicine was considered alternative medicine, and it was like that Rodney Dangerfield of it had no respect. I mean, people didn't respect herbal medicine, even though a lot of modern medicines, as we know, come from plants, either directly or indirectly. And the word drug, which means to dry in Dutch, from drug, a drug was a dried plant saved for later use for medicine, stored for medicine. So a drug originally is herbal or botanical in its very nature of the definition and how it comes from. And a lot of pharmacists and physicians don't even know that, by the way. It's like a surprise to them because they're not adequately educated. And that's part of also the cultural issue that back then and now. There's inadequate education, although it's growing, especially in pharmacy schools, but even then, and in some medical schools, there's inadequate education about nutrition and biochemistry, first of all. I'm a strong believer that every pharmacist and every physician should have at least 1, if not 2 semesters of nutritional biochemistry as a prerequisite to even studying pharmacology before they study the actions of drugs, whether they be natural or synthetic, single chemical entity drugs on the human organism or the animal if they're veterinary. They should understand how food affects organs and tissues and physiology. That should be a baseline, and it's not the case, unfortunately. So I'm a big believer in education for that. But what happened back then is herbs were considered old wives' tales, which I like because a lot of this information comes from our grandmothers or our grandmother's grandmother to the nth power going back. It was handed down orally, often by the women in the hunter-gatherer societies. It was the women that gathered the herbs and collected the lore and passed it on. But it was dismissed as old wives' tales or folk medicine or whatever. And so we look at the word traditional medicine in the herbal field, and we say, modern medicine shouldn't be calling itself traditional medicine, which they misuse that term a lot. We have traditional medicine. We're not talking about 100, 200 years of the development of modern medicine. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of years of the use and the oral transmission of culture and written transmission in some cases of culture of how to use plants for food, for fiber, for shelter, for fragrance, for medicine, for magic, for color, all these different uses of herbs, which is part of the science of ethnobotany. We focus on the medical anthropology and the medicinal part of ethnobotany, how people have learned to interact with and utilize through trial and error often, usually, the herbs that grew around them and the herbs that they traded with other peoples that did not grow around them but came from other places. So there's a long, rich, wonderful history. And modern research is exploding in this field. And one of the things we do at the American Botanical Council is we help document a lot of the growth of this research. We just published our 10,000th herb clip summary of, there are 2 to 3 page summaries of mostly clinical research studies, or in some cases, systematic reviews or meta-analyses of multiple studies on a specific plant or plant preparation, plant extract. We just published our 10,000th herb clip since like 1993. So we're codifying and delivering to people this information, and there's been an explosion in the research all over the world in medicinal and aromatic plants and what their benefits are compared to where things were 52 years ago when I first started in this field. So one of the areas that's different, and there's a number of things we can talk about, is just the growth of scientific research. Now, the quality of the scientific research often gets the research gets dismissed sometimes a priori by some medical professionals who are simply not educated adequately. Or they dismiss it because, well, they're small studies, or they're not adequately controlled, or they're biased because the company that made that product that the research is on funded the research. And those can be and often are legitimate concerns and legitimate. But when you look at the totality of all this, first of all, who's going to fund herbal medicine research if it's not the companies that are making some of these products? And one of the things we're doing at ABC, American Botanical Council, is stimulating, educating, and acknowledging companies that do invest in well-controlled, legitimate scientific clinical research on their extract or whatever their proprietary ingredient or product is, because we want to see more research, not because historical use can be very revealing and we respect the traditional use of medicinal plants, but there's modern reuses of plants that support the historical uses, and there's modern uses of plants that were not used traditionally, and so there's a lot of new opportunities and a lot of new areas for growth. I mean, they didn't have standardized ginkgo extract more than 60 years ago. And the use of ginkgo to increase peripheral circulation and memory and some of its cognitive abilities was not part of the traditional use for ginkgo, because ginkgo leaf was used in traditional Chinese medicine primarily for pulmonary purposes, not for the cognitive purposes, because they weren't making a 50-to-1 standardized extract that was standardized to certain parts of the ginkgo chemistry. So there's changes, and so biotechnology and modern chemical means and modern research has evolved in a way that helps the herbal movement evolve, and we have more options and more opportunities, while we still have at the same time powders and teas and capsules and tablets that with just the powdered herb or a simple extract of a 1 to 10 extract of a tincture or whatever. We have all kinds of opportunities, and there's a wider and wider spectrum of choice for different type of herbal products. Sometimes these different products along the spectrum can be used for different purposes, where the standardized extract that's concentrated, like the milk thistle extract, that produces some very well-documented safe benefits for the liver. We didn't have that 100 years ago or 500 years ago, although traditionally people did use milk thistle for liver, but not in the way we do it today. So there's lots of opportunities that come with the modernization of herbal medicine, while still acknowledging that just making tea, just boiling the water to make a tea, starts a healing and therapeutic process, if you will. So I'll stop right there because I think I went on too long about that, but there's still more to talk about, right?
No, it's wonderful. I just, and to your point, the science has so dramatically changed and elevated and brought us not only these new, amazingly, even in many cases, documented changes and things that we might have known for a long time, but now we're seeing them on paper. We have the availability of these studies, which are amazing. I think the thing that I've seen that has really just kind of been a huge change for me is the amount of the medical practitioners and doctors that have kind of slid over to the other side of the fence and now write handwritten prescriptions for herbs and for nutrients. And I'm enjoying that very much.
Well, and as they should, because it
Yes.
really is always about the patient. It's not about what, it's not about the medicine per se. It's about the patient and what's best for the patient. And if a patient, whether you're a physician or a naturopathic doctor or an herbalist or an acupuncturist or whatever your platform is and your licensing level, It's always about the patient. And often these relatively low-level, low-tech remedies should be fine enough. I mean, after all, when Peter Rabbit ate all the carrots in Farmer McGregor's carrot patch garden and came home with an upset tummy, what did Mrs. Rabbit give to Peter? Do you remember what the answer to that is? She brewed some chamomile tea.
Okay, got it.
Chamomile tea. And that was in Peter Rabbit 115 years ago when it first came out, I think, or so. So we have documentation in the literature that chamomile tea is good for upset tummies, at least for rabbits, presumably for humans too, and it is, and we know that. And we don't even need research on chamomile or peppermint. I mean, where do you think the after dinner mint idea came from? Because people use peppermint or spearmint to help settle stomachs after a big meal or whatever, and they get bloated feeling. These are part of traditional use, and we have sometimes vestiges in our modern culture that kind of echo or point to that traditional use where we've forgotten what the traditional use was.
I've always just enjoyed this industry so much, and I read as much as I can get my hands on, and and being able to interview people over the years, it's just because there's so much to learn. And I was talking with the group yesterday, and I was talking with them, and she said she's been in the industry like 30 years, and she's an herbalist, and she's amazing, and she grows herbs and makes tinctures, and she does all this wonderful stuff. She said, as much as I've learned, I think I forgot more than I've remembered, and I have to keep dosing myself with information because there's so much. And she goes, and now today there's always a new viewpoint today than the viewpoint even 5 years ago. So it's a continual process.
For me, it's always been about learning. I'm an avid learner. I'm an avid reader. I love it, but it's also about sharing. So I like to spin it off and share it as I go along, and that's how Herb Clip started. I mean, Herb Clip started because I was sitting with my accountant one day trying to figure out how we're going to pay the bills. This is the fact. ABC was like 1992, 1991, and we were 4 or 5 years old, and we had bills to pay, and we had the accounts delayable department, so to speak, because you also have the accounts invisible department. But anyway, so you have to, or accounts deceivable department. Yeah, and so we have fun. We have to run a business here. But what's happening? And we're running a nonprofit as a business. You have to know how to run it. And we're looking at, and it was $600 for copier toner. That was the bill for copier toner for the photocopier. I said, how much is this? Well, it's a 2-month bill. We've been using, I said, we're using $300 a month in toner alone. That's plus the paper, plus the photocopy, plus the labor. I said, what is all that about? She said, well, Mark, in addition to all the different normal needs we have as a nonprofit organization at the time, it's all those articles you send to your friends. I would get an article from the newspaper, a 1-page clipping, or a 6-page article from a magazine or a journal, and I would literally paperclip a memo from Mark with an ABC logo on it, routing slip, so to speak, and send it to Dr. James Duke and Dr. Norman Farnsworth, and both of whom have passed, or Dr. Varro Tyler. These are the 3 first board members of ABC who helped me start ABC, these silver-haired gentlemen who were ethnobotanists and pharmacognostics, respectively, medicinal plant experts, internationally recognized. And the late great Stephen Foster, my dear friend, who was a prolific writer and one of the world's greatest medicinal plant photographers, and other friends. I would say, here, check this out. And I didn't have any idea, Jeffrey, what the downstream labor and other costs were to the organization for this, basically this generosity, this wanting to share, impulse that I have about finding new information. This is interesting. What do you think? And so I was, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So instead of cutting back, which many companies would, or organizations say, we can't afford this, I picked up the phone and I called my old friend Ken Murdoch, who, by the way, is 80 years old today. Ken Murdoch's father started Nature's Way. And after Tom basically let George and Ken run it, and they took over, and then Ken took over and ran the business and built it up, and then sold it out to some European phytomedicine companies. They're some of the leading company, now Schwabe, which is one of the world's leading medicinal plant experts, which pioneered ginkgo and pioneered a lot of the research on hawthorn leaf and flower extract and other things. At any rate, It's a good company. I'm not here to promote that, but I'm just saying it's Ken's birthday. Happy birthday, Ken!
Happy
If
birthday,
you ever,
Ken.
if you see this, it's going to be after the fact, but it is. It's October 17th, 25. I think it's his birthday. Hope I'm not getting him in trouble. Anyway, so he's a year older than I am. Hey, way to go, Ken. So, anyway, the fact is that I called Ken and I called Jim Beck, who was the founder of Solar, which became Solaray, which became Nutraceutical Corporation, which is now called Better, I think, Better Being.
Better being.
It's a group of companies in Utah. And I said, hey guys, individually, I said, how would you like to have a window into my desk? I'm going to have all these articles and all this information, and you can use this information in your company for new product ideas and R&D and claim substantiation. This is before DSHEA was passed, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, when you had legitimate claims that you could make, for structure function claims. Just know what's going on. But window into my desk. How would you like that? And they said, sure. How much? Because there was clipping services you could subscribe to clipping service, and they would send you literally clippings that they would cut out of magazines and newspapers. And they said, how much? And I almost said, Jeffrey, I almost said $100 a month. And I said $300 a month. They said, fine. They said, fine. I made it up. And they said, fine, send us a bill. So the first year I raised $54,000 on that. The second year, $88,000. The third year, $117,000 from industry supporters who wanted access to the information that was just coming through my desk. This is before we had email and before we had the internet, and we would send the stuff and clip the article and send it out and get, etc. And that's how Herb Clip started. And we just finished our 10th, we just published our 10,000 of them, but it came out of necessity is the mother of invention and all of that, hackneyed stuff. But the fact was, I was sending out all this stuff for free and not realizing what it was costing us, and it was not sustainable. We couldn't afford it. So instead of cutting back, we created a new idea, which has become a mainstay of some of the ABC's many benefits.
Brilliant. I think it's so funny that you just yanked that 300 right out of the air. I love that. Oh, this is so wonderful. It's so important. Sometimes I think as an industry, we are still embracing the education profiles that are out there, and we're really, driving the education. And then sometimes I'm out there and I see companies that have gotten rid of their education departments. And to me, I find that very disheartening.
So let me share something with you, because this goes back to your original question. How was it then? What's happening now? Where are we going now? So I was just talking about two of the founders of two of the major products companies in the natural products dietary supplement, primarily herbal originally. Ken Murdoch was the son of the founder. Jim Beck was the founder of Solar / what became Nutraceutical and Better Being. And there's other people I could talk about, Ed and Sarah Smith at Herb Farm, and Rick Scalzo from Gaia Herbs, and Daniel Gagnon, who took over from Michael Moore at Herbs, etc., and so many others that are friends and colleagues. Some have gone, some have retired, some have sold their businesses. So things have changed. But it used to be there were more people in the community, and I talk about the community because it's bigger than the industry. It's the researchers, it's the health professionals that utilize these products and also do education. It's the educators, it's the consumers, it's the community. It's much bigger than the industry. So that's my stakeholder group. That's our at ABC. That's who we focus on. Industry's part of it, but it's also who's using it, who's researching it, who's studying it, etc. Because we're science-based. We're not a trade association. Trade associations are important. But they exist for one thing. They exist basically to promote and protect the financial interests of their members, of their commercial members. As a nonprofit research and education organization, our mission, our focus is very different. Our focus is to increase the quality and the quantity of reliable information on the research on these herbs and their history, and how they can be used responsibly for non-prescription and also for more serious health concerns. And so we have a much more public and community-oriented focus and mission, which is why we're a tax-exempt nonprofit. But the point is that what's happened is, with the evolution of the industry, of the businesses, companies have been bought and sold, companies have been put together and merged into like conglomerates, if you will, botanical and dietary supplement conglomerates where multiple brands come out of one company. And a lot of this is coming, the money for fueling this growth, which has been exponential. I mean, our herbal, we have published every year the HerbalGram or ABC Herb Market Report, which is one of the most often cited articles that we publish, cited internationally in journal articles, etc., because it's one of the best descriptions and measurements of what the size of the American herbal market is and what's selling, and the top 40 best-selling herbs in the natural food stores market, and the top best-selling 40 herbs in the mainstream market, which is drugstores and supermarkets, etc. And some of the same herbs are in the 40-40, but they're in different rankings. And the herb market report shows growth. And this year, I think in 2024, the latest year for which we have data, because we haven't finished 25 yet, it's up to $13 billion in total sales in the U.S. herb market alone, based on hard data and estimates. And $13 billion industry. This does not include the entire dietary supplement industry, which is something like $65 billion. We're talking about the herbal sector alone. And that doesn't include the tea business, and that doesn't include herbs sold in cosmetic ingredients. We're just talking about herbs sold as dietary supplements. So teas and cosmetics is another categories of product, and also some botanical extract used in legitimate over-the-counter medicines, or OTC drugs. I mean, that's another industry. So when we look at the marketplace, to fuel the growth of this, a lot of the companies, especially the growth, a lot of it online, a lot of companies come in, investors come in from investment banks, and also private equity companies. And private equity companies, have done, some of them have done a lot of really good things because they provided the financial capital for companies to scale to meet the growing demand that's happening with consumers, especially through the internet. Part of the problem with private equity companies, and I'll say this respectfully, is that often they're so beholden to their investors to produce return on investment, ROI, that in order to do that, they cut out what they consider to be non-necessary, non-essential expenses. And that includes, but is not limited to, cutting off support for nonprofit organizations that have done a lot of the work for 40 years, helping to build consumer awareness about the benefits of herbs, the fact that they exist, what's behind this, how's it work, why would anybody want to be interested in taking this herb in the first place. We help build, the raise the tide that floats all boats, right? A rising tide raises all boats in that metaphor. But a lot of these PE guys, with no disrespect, don't see it because they're coming from outside of our industry, outside of our community, and outside of our culture. And Jeffrey, you and I can have a whole conversation about the culture, because you've been involved with this industry and this community, not just the industry, for so many years. You understand the idea of nutrition and as the foundation for health, and natural as a preference that many consumers have over synthetic drugs whenever possible and whenever appropriate. And what's happening is it's often more appropriate more times than people realize, because and as the American Botanical Council, among other organizations, we're showing the compelling value proposition of when it is compelling and appropriate to use botanical and botanical medicines for a whole host and range, not only of adverse conditions, a whole range of small, medium, large importance regarding severity, but also in a proactive way, as adaptogens and as tonics and as ways to increase wellness without necessarily being anti anything. And that's, to me, a lot of the fun about herbs and about where this is going, and has been for thousands of years. The idea of using ginseng and or ashwagandha and or rhodiola and or Siberian ginseng, or now called eleuthero, and other botanicals that increase overall wellness, increase immune system response, increase energy, resistance against fatigue. I've been taking ginseng almost daily on and off for over 50 years. I've been I told you I'm a vegetarian. I'm a big believer in using herbs proactively, not just to treat illnesses or conditions, which they're useful for. But most of my herbal use is based on a proactive way. I take probably 12 or 14 supplements, including conventional nutritional supplements, vitamin C and coenzyme Q10 and, fish oil. I take fish oil. I'm a vegetarian, but I take fish oil. Omega 3s. I know you can get omega 3s from plant sources, but they're the short chain fatty acids usually. And most of the research is on the fish. Anyway, the point being that where we're going is more in a proactive, which is a different way of looking at health and healthcare than conventional Western medicine normally looks at. And that's one of the things that we have to offer, have offered, are offering now, and will be offering in the future in more compelling ways as this consumer-led revolution, this consumer-generated demand. This has not been something that the industry has created by heavy marketing. There's a lot of that, of course, but this is resonating with consumers. Consumers want natural medicines. Consumers want to feel good. Consumers want high-level wellness, and a lot of that's happening with herbs and other dietary supplements. It's not happening through the conventional medical model.
I think some of us, we got the bug very early. My grandmother was considered like the town herbalist, and she used to pick dandelions and make tea, and we used to go foraging for mushrooms and asparagus and everything, and she grew all of these beautiful herbs, and there was never medicine in her house, and she was Russian, Ukrainian, and Polish, and she was just like, it had been handed down to her mother to generation, and we were healthy kids, and we did everything that way. So I mean, I got the bug very early, and the rest of my cousins and stuff, they didn't get it, but I sure did.
Well, with respect, I'm gonna go back to something you just said and qualify. You said there was never medicine in her house. There was
Oh,
always there was
never mind.
always medicine in her house. That was just the medicines that she grew and she picked.
Absolutely, and I take that back. I appreciate. Thank you for thank you for pointing that out. That is so absolutely true.
Right.
And I
And
think, and to that point, I think that is a mindset that is out there. And I think, and I knew better. I should have caught myself as I said that, but a lot of people may not know, and they definitely do not even think about putting this into any kind of that category.
well, as you know, I am an editor. So, and I
So,
help. I'm an editor in chief of 6 publications and lots of other stuff. All available at herbalgram.org. A lot of free stuff at herbalgram.org. Come visit us. But I'll share something with you. You talk about medicine and the mindset. The word medicine, the origin of the word medicine, and the word remedy and medication. That MED root goes back to an Indo-European word which means in the middle. So a medicine or a remedy or a medication or meditation is a substance or a practice that restores balance. It's in the middle. And the whole idea of the word medicine from its very root is about restoring balance.
of that, I'm so stealing that.
Take it. Take it.
No, that's
I've been using that in my lectures for 40 years. Please take it. Spread it. Yes.
I that's wow. It's
I
not
one of my
often when I have to. It's not often when I lose my word for a second. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's one of my hobbies is studying etymology of words. Not
Wow.
entomology, which is insects, etymology, which is a fun hobby. Where do words come from? And here's another one, if you want, therapeutic, THER. The therapeutai were the Greek physicians, the Greek priests who were also the healers in the temples, the therapeutai. And the word therapeutic comes from that. And it comes from another Indo-European word, which goes down to a mantric root DHR, jur, which means to sustain or uphold. So the Sanskrit word dharma comes from that same root. So dharma in Sanskrit and in Hindu culture and in yoga comes from the same root word as therapy in the West, by the way.
Okay.
Dharma is to follow your internal path or whatever, and it comes from the word to sustain or uphold. Just fun stuff.
As I travel around the country, I I'm starting to see a lot more younger people coming into the, let's call it an industry, the family, whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I'm really happy to see that because we need young blood. We need people that are going to take the helm and pick up where we're leaving off. And it seemed like for the longest time, it wasn't something that was, maybe the industry was not maybe attractive to that group or that age group. But now I'm seeing 20 and 30-year-olds coming in, and it's kind of comforting, if that makes
It
sense.
resonates with a lot of the younger people. They really
I think so.
resonate with the herbal conversation and the supplements, but particularly the herbs. More than the
Herbs.
conventional supplements, it's the
Mhm.
herbal supplements that seem to, and that's because it's connected to life more. No disrespect to vitamin C, etc., and vitamin B vitamins, and all of them eventually came from food, etc. But the herbs still have their connection to vitality and to life and to growing in the ground and nature, and it's an easy value proposition for them to sink their teeth into and understand. And a lot of people, I mean, there's several kinds of consumers. One consumer might say, I don't care what it is, I don't care how it works or where it came from, just tell me what it's good for. That's all I want. I just want to know what is it good for. Tell me what to take. I don't have time for everything. But there's another growing group of people that are interested in the mystique and the history and the lore. And that's, I mean, I'm grateful for both kinds of consumers, but I prefer the latter, who wants to know a little bit more about it, because our publication HerbalGram, we've been documenting the growth of this community and helping propel the growth of this community. Yeah, with 145 issues and counting, and other stuff like that. We're helping to fuel the growth of interest in natural medicine.
I
And
am just on. This is amazing. I'm loving it. You're bringing out a lot of things that have not crossed my mind, if in a long time or if ever. So thank you.
well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thanks for including me. But there's a philosophical side to all this, and it's historical. It's philosophical. It's cultural. The American Botanical Council, the organization that I run, is basically an agent of social and cultural change. And we do it by helping educate people on the proper role, the history and the lore and the scientific basis for medicinal plants and their role in modern society, whether you take them as a flavorful tea, as an adaptogen to increase your immune system and your energy and your resistance, or as medicines, whether they be capsules, tablets, extracts, whatever, or more pharmaceutically or chemically defined phytomedicines and phytopharmaceuticals, all of which have their place along this spectrum of natural plant and fungal based ingredients and products. I mean, and it's interesting, it's compelling, it's positive, it's life affirming, and it's fun.
I want to thank you so much. This has been very much life changing for me, and this is, I can check this one off my bucket list. Two questions for you. Number one, leave us with a Mark Blumenthal thought of the day.
Um, I'm grateful every morning that I get to wake up into a healthy body. I'm grateful to wake up into a healthy body, that I get to do work in the world, and I have the support of my wonderful staff of employees and members of the organization and supporters and family and friends that support my work in the world. So gratitude at the very beginning is very important to me. I'm grateful, for, well, everything. And I go through my list of gratitudes in the morning, but there's so many, I kind of break it down to this. I break it down to one fundamental thing. You can end with this one. I'm grateful for gravity. I say thank you for gravity. Why gravity? If it weren't for gravity, there'd be no biosphere. The Earth, going something like 17,000 miles an hour around the sun, would have no atmosphere, no biosphere. We wouldn't be here. So thank you for the gravity that keeps the biosphere alive. And of course, if it weren't for gravity, the toilets wouldn't work. So hey,
Woo! I was nowhere ready for that. Okay. Question number two. If you were to leave the planet today, what would you want to be remembered for?
I would want to be remembered for the fact that I loved my friends and my family and always reached out to them and remembered their birthdays every year.
I like that. That's very sweet, very kind. I hope everybody enjoyed this today as much as I did, and I hope that you will pass this on and visit the platform and see these absolutely incredible people that I'm bringing to you with awesome information. Mark, thank you so much for being here today. I send you my best from my heart. Send you light.
Thank you.
I'll see you soon at Supply Side, and be well. And my best to you and your family and all your friends.
Thanks for including me in your all your sessions.
Thank you very much. Be well, everybody. God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.